Hello friends, this is Shubham Soni. Today Mr. Pranshu posted a question regarding who is not fighting. So, in the question there were three men, Anthony, Bernard and Charles, and it was asked that who is not fighting among these three. The question was, now our question becomes two of A, B and C are fighting with each other. The shorter of A and B is the older of the two fighters. The younger of B and C is the shorter of the two fighters. The taller of A and C is the younger of two fighters. Now the question is, who is not fighting? Now we would make three cases here. The first case is, suppose A is not fighting. The second case is, suppose B is not fighting. And the third case is, suppose C is not fighting. Now we will go periodically. Hence, suppose A is not fighting. Now suppose A is not fighting, then according to our first equation, the shorter of A and B is the older of the two fighter. Please concentrate here guys. As we have supposed that A is not fighting, then he cannot be the older of the two fighters because he is not even fighting. Thus, we will get the shorter of A and B. That means B is shorter, or we can say A is taller. Then in height, A would be taller than B. And what about the age? It is said that the shorter is the older of the two fighters. As B is shorter, then B is older of the two fighters. As we have supposed A is not fighting, that means B and C are fighting. Thus B is older than C. Now we will equate the second equation after the third equation. As in the second equation there are two unknowns. So now let's come to the third equation. The taller of A and C is the younger of two fighters. As A is not even fighting, then that means C is taller. Now, as C is taller than A, and we have the taller is the younger of two fighters. That means B is older than C or C is younger than B. Okay. Now come to the second equation. It says the younger of B and C is the shorter of two fighters. As we can see from the first and the third, the younger of B and C is C. Thus B is older than C, and the younger C is shorter than B. Thus it says B is taller than C. Now from the first and third equation, we can say that C is taller than A, who is taller than B. But this contradicts our second equation that B is taller than C. Contradiction. Thus, our assumption is wrong. Similarly, we will now come to the second supposition, that is B is not fighting. Now, from the first equation, the shorter of A and B is the older of the two fighters. As B is not fighting, then A is the shorter. If A is shorter, then we can say that B is taller than A. And similarly, as we have formed these equations, similarly A would be greater than C, and similarly we can say that B is greater than C, and here A is greater than C. Now we have the third equation, the taller of A and C. The taller of A and C is A, as we have seen in the second equation. Alright, and thus we have the taller one is the younger of the two fighters. That means the taller is A, that means C is older than A. But this contradicts our this equation. Thus, our assumption is wrong. Now, come to the third equation. Suppose C is not fighting. Then from these equations, we can say that A and B, we will not solve the first equation first, as there are two unknowns here, A and B, and we know one thing, that C is not fighting. Then we will solve the first equation in last. Now we will solve second and third equation. Then similarly, as we have did the first case and the second case, we will do the third case. And this gives us C is greater than B and A is greater than B. Now the A is greater than C and B is greater than A. Now the taller of A and C, the taller of A and C is A, and thus the taller of A and C is the younger of the two fighters. Alright, the taller of A and C. Who is the taller? Oh, sorry. Now the third case is first case. A is greater than, the taller of A and C is the younger of two fighters. Thus B is greater than A and A is greater than C. Now we have first equation, that is shorter of A and B is the older of the two fighters. The shorter of A and B, who is shorter? B is shorter, as we can see from the second equation we have formed before. Thus A is greater than B and here B is greater than A. Here we can see that none of the equation contradicts. Thus our third supposition is correct, that is C is not fighting. And who is C? C is Charles. He is not fighting. Not fighting. Thank you very much.